Hold it. This is a brand new thing we're getting ready to do today. We're not just going to do the regular show where we just talk to people. We got enough footage. We got tons of footage. We're going to continue to keep doing interviews. But I thought I'd preface this by telling you how different this is. In our vault over the last 20 years, we've interviewed old schoolers, new schoolers. We got video of workshops, how workshops started. We got opinions. We got all kind of things in the vault that may never get seen if we don't show it. So I thought we would do a review of those things where we bring those things in its raw form. And then I, and along with some other people, sometimes go through and review those things for you. So this is our first review. And remember, things are told by stories. So I always elicit the stories of people to tell the history and allow you to make the determination on how the stories go together to make fact, fiction, or whatever you want. But these are stories from original people that are telling the stories themselves. I got some footage of people and situations that you would never believe we have. So here we go. We're off and kicking, y'all. What's up, y'all? It's me, Og Skeeter Rabbit, the Bad Habit Rabbit, and I'm back one more time broadcasting from that rabbit hole. Yeah, the Island of Soul. Most of you know me as Og Skeeter Rabbit, but my real name is James Higgins, and I've been told before that some people don't remember me as James Higgins, and that's good because I am the original Skeeter Rabbit, Og Skeeter Rabbit. I got a special show for you today, and there have always been some controversy over terminology. Well, two of the most recognizable and controversial parts of terminology that exist today is politics and loyalty. So we're going to base our show on politics and loyalty. And I got a special guest coming on a little later that we're going to kind of tie this whole thing in. But first, I want to open it by telling you a historical story that I dealt with that has to do with that. You know, I received a call a little while ago. Well, not a little while ago. It was several years ago from an established teacher, producer, promoter, and he had ran across a contact in an overseas country that really wanted to do a workshop, and he negotiated it out beautifully, the workshop that we were going to do. And he called me and he said, Skeet, I want to do this workshop with you. Now, I'd never worked with this promoter before, but we had developed a really good rapport, and I trust him really, really well. So he told me, he says, we're going to do this workshop, me, you, and another Los Angeles, California, or not original, but dancer that was well known. We're going to do this workshop, and it's all set up. This is the guy, the contact, the promoter in this other country. Well, not too long after that, I got a email from this contact in the other country. He laid out terms and what was going to take place and how everything was going to go. And he told me he was flying out to LA and he wanted to sit down with me previously so that we could talk about this workshop, this fantastic workshop that had never been done in his country, and he was all excited. Well, when he flew out, I drove to Pasadena and I sat down and met him. I sat down in a restaurant. Then we went over to a coffee shop. We had a long talk about a lot of things. And he told me that the government was going to sponsor this workshop that he was going to do. And it was going to be this fantastic thing. He opened up this notebook, and a lot of the writings that he had submitted to the government on his proposal was straight off of Locker Legends. So it really made me proud that Locker Legends was developing these things. He told me that he came out to LA because he was going to do a workshop with another original by the name of Shabadoo. Good friend of mine, someone I've known for a long, long time. And that Shabadoo was going to do a private workshop with him. So I know how the game goes. I've been around this game for a long time, 66 years old. I knew that once Shabadoo found out that this guy was promoting a workshop, that Shabadoo was going to try to negotiate himself in. So I told him, good luck. and that our business is solidified, and that I'll see him when we get to that country. I got a call about a week later, and I knew what had happened. He told me, he said, "Hey, Skeeter," he says, "look, I can't take the guy that originally negotiated it, the guy that contacted you, I can't take him with me to the workshop, and I can't take the other guy to the workshop, but I want you to do this workshop with Shabba-Do." Now, I'd never worked in a workshop with Shabba-Do, and it would have been exciting to do it because Shabba-Do and I had a pretty good relationship, pretty good, decent relationship from way back in our locker days. But loyalty, not to the business, but to the game of locking, stopped me from doing it. Because the person that had contacted me, my contact was Ricki Carrenza. And I could not backstab him and take a gig, no matter how much the gig was paying. It was a country I'd never been to. Because he was the one that set that up. He was my contact. And the game of loyalty to locking and the game of loyalty to street dance is that you do not backstab someone with someone that they introduce you to. So I told him, no, I couldn't do it. I didn't do the gig. Shabba-Do did the gig, and it came off successful, probably plenty of money for Shabba-Do because the guy didn't have to pay 3 people. And I called and I told Ricki Carrenza that I couldn't in good conscience make that move. Ricki Carrenza is my guest today. And this is a continuation of another interview that we did with him because it was so much that he has to tell, and he has so much experience. He's a producer. He's a choreographer. He's a teacher that loves to teach young kids. He loves kids. And I wanted to bring him back on because he has a story in his history to tell, just like I told you that story. Brother Ricki, good to see you again, man.
Hey,
Good to have you back. Again. And we got to tell about the video, the movie that you produced as a movie producer that I happen to narrate. I happen to be asked to narrate. And again, I do things because it's a need for the education. We didn't do this. I didn't do this to get paid. Hopefully it brings some revenue back to you because you put a lot of money out. Yeah. But I donate because when something needs to be told, then that's what I want to do, is make sure that there's a legacy of the history left. So I don't always ask. I've never asked a promoter for a particular fee. It's always been, what is their budget or what can they afford to do? And if it was a valuable cause, that's what it was about. Now, we're going to do something here. Great production, Ricki. The entire world has been exposed to a phenomenon they can't explain.
Hip-hop has become, right now, a well-known word in the realm of dance.
Everything that is street dance, they call it hip-hop.
Which came first, street dance or hip-hop?
I don't know. It's a tricky one.
To explore that, we must go back before all of this existed. Popularity is increasing, but the knowledge and understanding is decreasing. Balance is what must be kept for the dancer's personal growth and career, but most of all, for the preservation of the culture itself. My name's James Higgins. I am a dancer by heart, not by profession. The culture I came from proudly dubbed me a locker. They call me Skeeter Rabbit. Ricky.
Beautiful, beautiful. It still gives me goosebumps watching the
Well,
trailer.
that's why the world has to see this in some form or fashion. I know we got to be very, very meticulous on how we get that out and how it's gotten out. It's been in existence for a little while, but everyone asked me, can they see it? So I've told people, and me and you've talked about it, setting up a private screening just like we did here with the entire movie. So we're waiting on a date from you as to when we can get together, and then you can go on there just like we did there, and we can only put this screening out in for members of the Locker Legends Facebook group. That's the only people that'll be able to see it. So members of the Locker Legends Facebook group, because they've been dying and asking me, I don't want to say they're dying, not in this COVID world, but they've been asking me to see this video. So as soon as you can tell me, and we can bring the stream up, like I just did there, we can sit down, me and you, the narrator and the producer, and we can go over why we did what we did. And I think that it's a powerful film, Ricky, and I think that they'll really enjoy seeing it. And I wish the best of success. Like I said, I donated and gave my time as a narrator there because there was a message necessary to be told. So we have a date, y'all, October 9th. We're going to do a premiere screening of the entire video, the entire movie of Beyond Hip Hop. And that was done basically to clarify terminology that is misconstrued around the world, with great video scenes and great explanation of some of these dance styles. So join us on that date. Now back on to the review. And sometimes people say they reap their reward later on. Hey, that can happen. So Ricky, let's sit down and put a date together. Let's get it advertised out there, and let's do it just for the members of the Locker Legends Facebook group.
Let's do it. Let's do it. It's a very important story to be told, to share. Thank you so much, Skate, for sharing your time there, and also your input. And we work on it for some time. We were very meticulous. We tried to keep a balance all the time, and as I also narrated there, that I was trying to make it as neutral as possible, and your presence made it balanced, and so ever grateful for that one. As you said that you just basically donated. There was no arrangement of fee here. And that's what I appreciate about you, and that's also where I also identify with you, because I've been doing things for the community as well, and I don't even want to mention it, but it's just we have a common bond in here in sharing and helping the community, and I appreciate your friendship so much. Thank you for having me back.
As I was telling people, the essence of this one is loyalty and politics. Two words that often in the dance world gets mixed up, Rick. Now, I want you to tell your story and start out with how you met the OGs and how you got started, because the international scene got started. And you've been around several countries: Finland, the Philippines, Italy. You've done a lot of things. And I want you to tell your story, how you want to tell your story. And I want you to tie in some things. So I'm going to drop myself right out of this thing. And I'm going to let you start out. Let's see what we're going to start out with, Ricky. We're going to go to right here, Ricky. We're going to start out with how and when were you introduced to any of the originals? How did you get into this doggone thing? So, Ricky, I'm going to turn it over to you. And I'll be back and we'll talk about some things. And we're right here to finish up the show. But I'm going to turn this over to you. How and when were you introduced to any of the originals, and how did you get going in this thing?
I met Greg. Let's start with Greg, because he was basically the beginning of everything here. So I met Greg in France sometime in the I think in the late 90s, early 2000. And then we became good friends since then. We kept in contact, and he wanted me to be a part of what he was organizing. He was organizing a camp with you, and he wanted me to be a part of it. He wanted me to bring you and also him to Italia, and then he asked me to also come to that camp. Was it in 2005? Yeah, I think it was in 2005. And so that was it. And then I think in 2003 I went to LA for another event there. There was an event there in LA Street Dance or something. It was 2003, I think. Yeah, 2003 December, I think. And then we met there again. And then he was speaking to me about the camp. Yes, about the 2000 camp, the camp that he was organizing with you. And that was it. And then afterwards, we, he actually invited me to that camp, to not that 2005 camp, but because I couldn't come at that time for some reasons. There was some there was another work that I had to do in Italy. I couldn't come, but I was able to come in the 2006, and he asked me to film the whole camp 2006, and the name changed. The name changed, yeah. And
let me ask you. Let me jump in and get a quick one in. When you came on that scene there, Rick, you saw the way Greg was teaching, and there were different variations of a few of the OGs. I wasn't on that teaching scene until 2005. That teaching scene. So when you got involved with it, what was the difference between the teachings did you see in the originals between Greg, Don, myself, Shab, and Go-Go? What was the philosophies that was going on?
Okay, this is a good question. I never had an opportunity to learn from Don. I heard things about his lessons, and but I never had a chance. But with you, of course, we did several times. With Shab, several times. Tony Gogo, I saw him how he taught. Personally, I was there, and Greg, of course, many times, because he basically mentored me and he taught me. Greg is very structured. Yeah, he's very structured. He's a teacher. He's a natural teacher. He teaches. He not only the steps, but he teaches about life, even his own life, and he always has some good and funny stories to accompany the step, and it was never boring. Even 3 hours of workshop with him, never boring. he's always teaching something.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. What was the difference you saw in what you heard about Don's philosophy of teaching? And did I have a philosophy, and what did you see in Shab's philosophy of teaching, Rick?
Well, first let me go back to that question a while ago. You asked about Don. So that's what I heard. I heard that Don was always promoting, was teaching about more on freestyling all the time. That was it. And then you be you, and I like it, of course. Because I think that's the essence of dance, is you be you. So Don was focused more on that. That's what I heard. Okay, as I said, I never saw him personally teaching in a workshop. Of course, I've seen in videos and stuff, and also when I was there at the HHI, I heard people talking about Don's class. The philosophy, as far as philosophy is concerned, did you mean the way the teaching is conducted, or did you mean
just like you said that Greg was did teaching? I know that when I started teaching, I started bringing people together and actually doing something like forums in the middle of my class. I started teaching and explaining stuff.
Yeah.
So did you see how was that the philosophy with me? And tell a little bit about the philosophy with Shabadoo. I knew Shabadoo very well, being in the lockers and from the original scene, but I never actually saw him teach in person. Let me correct it. I did go out to his school and see him teach in person, but his philosophy of teaching, what did you see? I want you to kind of compare the differences between. Right. Here's what I was getting at that particular point in the interview. That in the early 2000s, there was a tremendous division between, and people thought it a lot of times that it was personal, and it was between Don Campbell, Greg Campbell-Locke Jr., but I'm going to remind you that his first original name was just Campbell Jr. It's not Campbell-Locke Jr. I knew Don Campbell as Don Campbell. And in the streets, he was known as Hat Man by people that didn't really know who he was. So there was a conflict between Greg and Don. But there was also a conflict between Don and Shabadoo, and a small one between Shabadoo and Greg. There was a huge conflict that even encompassed Mr. Penguin, and it encompassed Tony Basil. So the lockers had fragmented, and those fragments had went into camps of who these dancers were going to support, who these new dancers were going to support, and who was going to support the new dancers. So everybody fragmented, locking into camps, which was a sad thing to see. And one of the major things was trying to bring it back to the main essence of what the heck locking as a street dance and its purpose and its meaning was, and not so much of the fragmentation. So I'm trying to show here, or lead Ricki into talking about how he saw the fragmented and the different styles of teaching take place. I taught the way Greg taught, the way we saw Don teach, and if you saw Go-Go teach, and anybody else, the philosophy of any of the other originals, was there differences in the different styles of teaching?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Your teaching and Greg are more or less similar, very structured, historically based. It's progressive. It means like it goes forward quickly. You taught a step, and that's it. And the same way with Fluky. I also had an opportunity to learn from Fluky many times too, and you can see find it on YouTube. Those lessons, just type it. Understyle
is one of the dancers that did not have a marketing agenda.
So Shab, he is. Yeah, he's also structured. Shab was very clever. He's a very sharp guy. But one thing I noticed, it was a little bit slow. Like he thought he came here in Finland many times, and of course maybe because he was considering also the level of the students. But with Greg and you had a structure, and it was almost like it's doable, but it's challenging, but you kept on going, and also the content are more or less the same. But with Shab, he was teaching, of course, his own way, and as a matter of fact, he wanted to promote this Shab. What was it called? Swag or something? Sway. Was it swag?
It was
sway. And so it was not the same as what we were learning from you, from Greg, from Fluky, and even from Scooby, because what all of you were teaching were somehow kind of unified. Yeah, but he was introducing a way that somehow it was not almost reminiscent of the locking that we see on TV, the locking that we see the original lockers were performing. I mean, he was doing something different. But
yeah, and I'm going to jump in there. This is your show. I want you to continue telling the way that you saw things. I saw difference in concepts too, depending on where a person came through the locking scene back in the day. And you know, one of my main things was teaching history, lost history. So I added lost history, cultural history, the 1960s and things into mine. And me and Greg was very similar because I saw Greg as very, very structured. Greg was one of the only people that put a structure to the dance. And that's what the dance needed so they could be preserved. You got to have a structure to preserve it. Greg and Shabba-Do had something in common, though, also the entertainment aspect. Shabba-Do was an entertainer. He was a master entertainer. So in his classes, he actually gave a little bit of talking about how to become an entertainer, how to be successful like he was as an entertainer. And it was all about the camera. And Shab taught structure, but he taught a lot about the camera, those sort of things. I think me, Greg, Scooby, and Tony Gogo came from that same background in Watson Compton. So we were pretty similar in there. Tony Gogo was a little more into the show than I was. And Fluky was very, very, this is the move, this is how you repeat the move, and this is how you do the move. So Fluky was very on a key like that. So that's how I saw it, and you kind of explained it the same way. Now, Ricky, here's something that in the time when I came back onto this new school scene, because I never left the old school scene. Old school scene always exists in South Central Los Angeles. I raised businesses there. I did everything there most of my life. But when I came back, I seen something that I had seen throughout when locking became a commercial entity. I seen a conflict between Greg and Don's philosophies. And I saw Tony Basil in the middle trying to balance them out. But I saw Greg and Don had a conflict in philosophies. And it kind of sifted over into the new school dance scene and the international scene. Did you see the same thing? Was there a conflict in philosophy between Greg and Don?
Yeah, I heard about it, and I also experienced it myself. Yeah, I think the main conflict, according to what I heard, is Don was teaching more on freestyle. I think that's basically what I kept hearing, that he was not really teaching you the structure. And I of course I understand and I appreciate that, because Don was a freestyler, like legendary. He's a genius in freestyling. But Greg was more on the structure, as we kept mentioning. Both are good, I think that, but the most important thing I think is the balance.
Now, let's pay attention to why there was a division between Greg and Don. Because one taught a structure. That was Greg Campbell Locke Jr. that taught a structure within the dance. And that structure was very much needed to preserve an art form. You have to have a structure in order to preserve an art form. You cannot preserve an art form without a structure of dance. Greg had a structure of dance, and it emanated from Watts Writers Workshop, where we first put a structure together. It also emanated from his relationship with Jimmy Scooby-Doo Foster, because through Jimmy Scooby-Doo himself and the Go-Go Brothers, they created a structure with unison steps and that Compton Watts style. But Don Campbell created what was called his total freedom of improvisation. And with the total freedom of improvisation, Don could totally go to a club and create anything, and it was brand new. Well, the two philosophies collided, and it also collided with Don becoming jealous of Greg teaching structure, and Greg believing that Don wanted total credit for things that he didn't create, things that he had to be taught to do, like the unison steps of the dance. So this is what I'm showing as to why in the early 2000s, there was such a division within all of the locking students, because they either had to select Don or Greg, or then there was a third person, or Shabba-Do, who was the most popular in the commercial dance scene. They had to either choose him. because Shabadoo became very, very popular in all of his selections of the movie Breaking. So let's go on and continue with our interview with Ricki Carrenza.
Balance between the two, the freestyling and the structure, especially when you are in a classroom setup or in a class setup, in a dance school setup, then you need to really have a structure, and a program, so that people can learn, of course. Because if you kept on, freestyling, then you the students cannot learn. It's almost like I ask you, hey, I'll teach you how to do French, but just freestyle, the French language or Japanese language or Filipino language, just freestyle. Of course not. You need to have content. You need to have a content, a substance to pass on, an information to pass on to your students. And then they will learn it. And then eventually the freedom or the freestyle comes later on how you formulate the sentence. It's the same way with dance. It is important to pass on or to receive that basic info that makes it distinct. And then later on, you can put on your own flavor. That is the freestyle. And that's what the philosophy between the two that I heard. Because as I said, I never took a class from Don.
You're absolutely right. Not only did I hear it, I started to experience a pull from one side to the other between the dancers, between Greg and Don, and between camps that were forming with people that was backing either one of them. You either had to be about Don's total creativity in the freestyle of dance, or you had to be about Greg's structure and the steps in dance. Now, like I said, I came along with Greg at Watch Riders Workshop, so I understood the structure of it. And I also understood that the dance needed structure, just like you so eloquently said, Ricki, to have an art form to pass on. If you're going to charge somebody to come to a workshop, you have to have educational content and structure to teach them.
Exactly.
Otherwise, it's called a party, right?
That's
party.
it.
I call it a workshop.
Yeah, free for all party. That's what it is.
But
exactly.
I began to understand why Don did not want structure, because Don was not part of the creating of the structure of the dance. Don himself had to be taught the unison steps.
Yeah, I heard that. Greg told me that too as well.
Yeah, Don was a total freestyler. But Don was the only one that came along in an era where he could be the total freestyler, because he was the creator of what I say is the dance style.
Exactly.
But as the art form was being put together and people had to coincide, it's like if you were going to be part of Greg, Shab, and Leo's trio, you had to know how to execute the moves for unison choreography.
Partisanship.
All right, folks, remember, it's a good investment. $1 will get you two.
If you look at the vaccination rates,
That's the way we went into the streets and we partied. That's the way we played around and we had a great time out in the streets. But as I said, it developed from the social party inside of the clubs and the house parties. And it went from there to the entertainment act. It went from there to here, to the entertainment act. And there's a story with this video that I'll get into in one of our next episodes. But this is where it went into an act where they dressed the style, had a costuming. But prior to that, it was just like you seen Fred Berry do it in the restaurant scene, in the TV show was happening. And from this performance came parts of competitive that led into the new battle style. Let's continue the interview, y'all. Yeah. You couldn't get out there and freestyle. That's why Slim and Penguin and Don never was in their trio because they executed together. Now the group learned choreography together to transition, and Don and Slim had to be taught it. Penguin knew some from the party social aspect. So you're absolutely correct. You needed both. And that's why even today in Locker Legends, I teach Don created the style of dance. The locking, the Campbell locking style of dance, Don created that. That's total creativity. That's freestyle.
Yes.
But when you get to talking about the art form, the teachable, judgeable art form, the structure came through Greg to the Lockers, but it came from Watch Writers Workshop and the structure of dancers being able to do unison and choreography together. So I think you talked about that real well, and I could see that there was conflict between people that were setting up camp.
Yeah,
there were people that needed what do you call it? Validation.
Yeah,
and their validation was having one of the OGs to validate them. So you either wanted Don, the creator, to validate you, and you had people, and I'll say like Richie Rich, that was validated by Don calling him the lock master. That was validation for him. Then you had people that wanted to be validated by Greg. You had people like Sundance that wanted to be validated by Greg, that had learned from Greg, and that set up camps. And it actually set up a division between Don and Greg, because Don thought that Greg was taking the rights of him being the creator. One of the first times I ever went to, and Greg really was, new school events. But there was another thing. Greg conflict Campbell was dealing Jr., with those two which camps, was originally Campbell Jr. And those two wasn't Campbell Lock. It was Campbell Jr. Coached me very because hard. Don's original name was just, everyone called him Campbell, or Hat Man, as he was known in the streets.
Okay.
So Don Campbell Lock Jr. and Campbell, everyone thought they were related. Mm-hmm. And Don, when Greg started traveling, people thought that he was actually Campbell Lock. And there were times that he didn't clarify that, and it caused a problem between
I remember that. I remember that.
Real quick, I remember when I first went to Japan, and the poster said Campbell Lock. It said Greg in small writing and Campbell Lock in big writing. And I said, Greg, they're going to think that you're Don. And Greg was like, that's not my fault. But I said, well, it's somebody's fault when Don finds out. So that caused the problem. Now we're going to go to this question right here, Ricky. What do you know? You started this earlier. What did you know about the origin of the Las Vegas camp, and how did you get involved in that camp?
All right. So as I was saying earlier, that Greg has mentioned this to me sometime in the early part of the 2000 already. And he mentioned about you, and I got so excited. I think we were able to communicate too through email. And then I was excited to be a part of it. He said that, okay, I should bring it to Italia. And then he said, okay, I'm going to try to organize first in LA. And so that was the 2005. I wasn't able to come for some reasons. But the next year, he personally invited me. He said, okay, come over. He even wrote me a letter, that I had to show to the U.S. Embassy.
2005.
And then, so that I could, get the permission to get in.
I didn't know he had actually moved to Las Vegas.
So he took care of me. He picked me up. He invited me to his own home, and then he was the one who asked me to film this camp. And at first it was a different name, and then later on it became the Elite Locking Camp. And so that's how I got to know the ELC from the beginning, even before it was conceived, even during the time that it was conceived, I was always informed, and I was always invited by Greg to become a part of it. And then, of course, I met later on when I got to Vegas. I met, of course, Frank, who's a good brother, a good friend of mine. So, and then that's how I got to be involved, and I was trying to help in every possible way that I could.
Yeah, good stuff. So from that camp that you did in in Las Vegas, that 2006 camp, because
Yes, that was it.
the original
2006.
2005 camp I did with Greg, and there's a story about how I didn't know that it had been switched from LA, but I drove down to do that camp with Greg, and it was it kind of surprised him that I came down to do that camp, because I was supposed to be in the hospital at the time, but I made it there, and it was a great thing to actually do the camp. I'm going to bring up something that was really cool at the time, and that's this. That is the 2005 camp in Las Vegas. You see what I got in my arms there?
Is this Las Vegas or in Pomona?
No, that's in Las Vegas.
This is in Las Vegas.
It was supposed to be in Pomona. It was supposed to be in Ontario.
Ontario, yeah, Ontario.
But Greg never told me that he was moving it to Las Vegas.
Is this 2005?
This is 2005. He never told me he was moving it to Las Vegas. I found out about a week before the camp was to exist that Greg had got people in Las Vegas to set it up for him, because Greg went to do Rennie Harris's Philadelphia camp the week before.
Yeah.
But Greg didn't tell me he was going to do Philadelphia's camp.
Okay.
He went and did Philadelphia's camp when he was supposed to be arranging the camp in Ontario. So when I found out he was set up the camp in Las Vegas, I drove there. And I drove there because I had planned to do something very special for Greg at our first camp, our first Lock Legends boot camp. That's why what you see in my arms there, and the guy next to me is Tito Collins, another original.
Yes, I met him too. Yeah.
Yeah, that was Greg's. That was the time that I awarded Greg his Lifetime Achievement Award from Locker Legends at the 2005 camp. Also, Tito Collins received a Lifetime Award at that camp. But Greg, you see the look on his face on that picture there?
Mm-hmm.
Greg didn't know he was going to receive that. He didn't even know I was going to make it to that camp. Now, the next year, Greg and I were supposed to resume our plans for the Locker Legends boot camp. But I didn't find out that he had rearranged the camp and was calling it now the Elite Camp. And he had now taken it and given a lot of it to Sundance in Las Vegas. So people want to know how the Las Vegas camp got started and what was the beginning of the Las Vegas camp. Because again, there are stories that are untold, that somewhere in the history needs to be told. When Greg and I got back together in like 2001, 2002, we made a lot of plans. We had planned to give certificates. Greg at the time was giving out plaques that had to be etched and cost an awful lot of money. I was more illiterate in the computers. So I told him that we could print out certificates. And the advantage of the certificate is we were the ones that signed them, so that our names would always be in front of whoever we endorsed with the certificates. If you notice in the picture, Greg had also made some certificates because he didn't know I was coming to that camp. And he was going to endorse the people that he was going to make sure that he endorsed. This is part of the stories of history, of how things take place with loyalty in politics. But when I got there, it was a total different story. Me and Greg got along. We did the camp really, really well. And Greg was surprised that I had bought on those plaques a Lifetime Achievement Award from Locker Legends. And him and Tito Collins received the first two. The plan was to go to Japan so that we could present Tony Gogo with his Lifetime Achievement Award, so that Tony Gogo could then sign certificates for the students in Japan that he had taught, so that the chain of education would be kept in line, so that people would know how and who it came through. That didn't materialize, and I had to give Tony Gogo his Locker Legends Achievement Award in Moscow, in Russia. And that footage exists, and we will do something on that somewhere in the future also. But I want you to see how these camps developed. And I want you to see how the teaching of these things developed from the year 2000 on, how in locking. Now, there's other stories in hip hop and in breaking and all of that. And some of them connect. But I wanted you to see how locking had
always fragmented because they never could come together without the business end of it breaking up the main passion of teaching the structure and culture of the dance. And that's where your story comes in, where you now see that you became involved in the camp and were brought up there with Sundance and Greg at that camp. And the camp had grown. I think you brought a lot of students, didn't you?
Yeah. And I brought also some students there in 2006.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And all the students
From here, students from here, from Finland, yes.
From Finland. And it's a lot of the students who had originally signed up through the Locker Legends website. Greg now had access to the website, and he brought them to Vegas because remember there was no website at the time. The connections were by old snail mail. And I think Greg, you might laugh at this one. Greg had a way of sending colored envelopes. He would send green or red envelopes.
Exactly.
I said, why do you send green or red envelopes? He said, so they'll know it's me when they see it in the mail.
Very clever, Greg.
He was a clever guy. Now, since we've gotten to this part, from that camp, you decided to do an international camp. You got a very, very interesting story about the international camp and how some things came back about the international camp. And then we want to go into politics and loyalty. So tell that story, will you?
So anyway, so I suggested to him, hey, I saw the spirit of the camp, I saw the growing. And of course, I kind of felt that I was a part of it because of Greg. Greg was the whole time, my inspirer. He inspired me, and also he was mentoring me. He was helping me in so many ways. We became really good friends. So I felt, because of my loyalty to Greg and also, to what he was doing. So I was there the whole time trying to help as much as I can. And I suggested, hey, Frank, let's take ELC to Finland, because I have some students here. I have a dance school here, and I have my own network here, and also in a neighboring countries. I said, let's do it. A year before that, I think it was 2013 when we did it here. I was always, almost every year I was in Vegas, and I was always I tried as much as possible all the time to be a part of the ELC. I always visit, and I try to support, and I even film. I remember I filmed there different times. So anyway, so Frank said, well, Frank was a little bit hesitant because he said, no, I'm going to quit now. I'm tired of this one. He said that, I love the spirit. I said, come on, now, don't quit now, bro. I said, no, this is a beautiful thing. ELC is a beautiful thing. This spirit, the community there at ELC is beautiful. The friendship, the relationship that are being built, and and of course the dance itself. It's so beautiful. And I said, come on, don't let it die out. I mean, no, don't quit now, Frank. He said, no, I want to quit now. And I said, come on, let's go forward. This is a beautiful thing. And then I eventually was able to convince him to bring it to Finland here. But he said, I'm not gonna take the risk, Ricky. So if you want to organize it, take all the all the risk. I will help. He said, I will support it every way I can. He said, but I can't take you organize it yourself. So eventually, I said, okay, I'll take all the risk, the financial risk. Of organizing it and paying for this one, and whether we have people or not. Of course, there would be expenses when you organize something like this. And so I said, okay, I will take it. But I told him, okay, give me some time. So let's have a plan. Let's make a deadline. Okay, I will ask for a pre-registration, and then if we don't have people, then we will cancel it. So that way we don't, spend anything, an unnecessary costs if the camp is not gonna go through. So anyway, we set up a deadline, and there was a deadline, and then we were able to somehow get it. And I told him, Frank, I think we can make it. We can make it, and we have enough registration now. We will just be equal. Almost there. But he said, well, and there was a time that he was like, he was, not so convinced. He said, no, you can quit it. You can call it. You just call it out. He said no more. And I said, come on, Frank. A lot of people are already waiting for it. And I said, let's go. Even though I'll take all the risk. I said, no problem. I'll take all the risk. So eventually, it went through. I had to pay for the air ticket and all the hotels for the
Now,
others.
who all did you bring? Who all got involved? Because I know
Well,
to do
well, at
workshops
first,
like that, you got to bring a original, a big name to draw. Who all was involved in that?
yeah. So at first, I said, okay, so to minimize the cost, we have to have limited people, and so it was supposed to be only Frank and Scooby. Scooby, I have become close to, because when I met him in 2011. I think that he came to my hotel in Circus. He was introduced to me by Frank. He said, "Hey, Ricky, I want you to meet, Scooby Doo, one of the originals, the pioneers." And okay. And so he came over to my hotel at that time in Circus. And then we had lunch together, and we talked about doing projects together, doing things. And he was very excited about, he said, "Can you help me, tell my movie, my story?" I said, "Okay, I will help you," because he knew that I was a filmmaker. I said, let's talk about it later on. So anyway, I said the original plan was to bring Frank and Scooby only. But then I said, "Oh, okay, I love you, I love the team. I want to bring Tash too." At that time, I was always in communication with Tash too. I met her at the Hip Hop International, and we became good friends. And I said, "No, let's bring Tash too." And I said, let's bring also Fred. And Fred is just across the continent, the country. He's in UK. I said, let's bring them over. So anyway, and Frank said, "Oh, okay, that of course it will increase the cost." I said, I think I can take care of the finances. I will pay for it, because and but Frank, he was just being a good man, and he said, "Okay, you take care of them. I'll pay for my own. I don't want to be a burden to you, Ricky, because I don't want." He has this initiative. He has this sensitivity. He said, "Ricky, don't worry about me. I'll take care of myself. You take care of them. Just pay for their airfare and in their hotel." So which I did. So that was it. So we brought them here, and then when we were here, I didn't expect that there would be some problems. There would be some misunderstanding. And I think it was because of the philosophy. Again, we were talking about the philosophy, because that night, just before we started the camp, we were invited by another good friend, who's also a good friend to Greg, Petri Turtiainen. He invited us to his own home, and then we had dinner there. So anyway, back to the story. So on that night, when we were at the house of Petri, we were talking about how to help the community, locking the community, and to make it bigger, the ELC. And I said, "Hey, this is a wonderful event. This is a wonderful camp. The spirit, the dancers who come there, a beautiful relationship." And I said, that's treasure. I said, we should inspire more people. And then I suggested, "Hey, let's bring in Don," because we were thinking about to how to make it more authentic. And I said, let's bring in Don. And he's the guy, he's the guy behind all of this. And I knew about the conflicts but from other dancers, because they said, "Oh, he couldn't teach," and that. But I said, even his presence alone would help the camp, and his spirit, Oh man, what happened is when I brought that to the table, I got attacked.
Again, the division between Don and the creative freestyle, and Greg and the structure. They needed Greg's structure, the structure from Watts Writer's Workshop, the structure of all of the dancers, the community, and the culture. They needed the structure put together by that style of unison dance, along with the creativity of Don. So trying to bring those two back in some form, or separating them, was the agenda of a lot of people.
No, he cannot teach. He must not be able to he must not be invited. Particularly Tash was very, very strong about it. I mean, don't get me wrong, Tash and I have good relationship. I respect her, and I there's no malice in this, but I'm just telling
you
the
don't have
story.
to apologize for telling the truth of the
Yeah,
story.
I'm
These
just telling the
stories gotta
story.
get
Yeah.
told.
I'm just telling the story that I got immediately attacked by that. Like, hey, don't bring Don. He cannot teach. And I said, what if we just allow him to talk and then show videos of himself? We can show videos, footage of him, and then he will give us a commentary. I think that's precious education. I said, we hear it directly from him. But they did not like it. I was attacked severely, verbally.
There was a difference. It was the difference in the philosophies of the camp and the division between Greg and Don for years. That the camp had taught Greg structure for so many years, and now Don, when Don comes, Don does not want that structure taught. But it's amazing the politics. Because eventually the camp embraced Don, and all of a sudden it was the reverse.
I was surprised when I heard later on that, oh, Don is a part of it. I said, oh yes, finally. I said, but I remember the conversation. I said, I said, I thought that he was not welcome in ELC, and suddenly he's there. And for some reason, I'm thinking, I think at that particular time when I brought Scooby here, he was not feeling well. He was he had some really health issues, and we were always trying to care for him. He's like a father to us, and to me particularly. He's a good friend, and
Well,
and so for some reasons I felt that.
Let's take it back to the concept of loyalty to what and to who. Because you brought up another good thing. 2011 is right when Scooby found Locker Legends, and he's the one that emailed me, I think, when his wife found the website, and he realized that some of the things in the website no one could know except an original. So he contacted me at Locker Legends, and he wanted to give his condolences about Greg, who had just passed. And at first, I didn't believe it was Scooby-Doo, because everyone thought Scooby had passed away and disappeared, and no one knew what Scooby was. So when he contacted me, and I sent the phone number, and he called me, we talked and we laughed for a long time about old things. And I told him that there was a brand new scene, and the scene was teaching, and big people were able to travel in the whole bit. And I traveled to Las Vegas and sat down with him. Now that brings up another subject for a future episode about how Scooby came back on the scene and what happened with Scooby on the scene. This is at that very first meeting with Jimmy Scooby-Doo Foster. That's an old work partner of mine, Arnell Washington, who's actually recorded and took some of the pictures, as we sat in a restaurant with Jimmy and his wife, Gina, and we told them about the new school dance scene that existed, workshops that existed, and how they were looking for OGs and how we thought Jimmy had been gone during that period of time. That explains a lot of it, of how he met Jimmy Foster after that time frame, and how Jimmy learned that there was a new scene that he could become involved in. But again, loyalty to the game or loyalty to the business affects it all. That is the first meeting that I ever met with Scooby on the first trip to Las Vegas, when no one had seen him. Sundance had not seen him at that time. Nobody had seen him. And we made plans to bring Scooby to the Hip Hop International and for me to introduce him on stage. That's the very first time that I had seen Scooby in almost 30 years. And nobody in the new school had seen Scooby there. That's in one of the hotels in Las Vegas. And I still have the entire footage from that. And we talked. And the idea that we were going to get together and talk about some of the original things that had taken place. My boy Greg had just come back from the UK. He called me from the UK and he told me he was at his I don't know what he called Fred, but he called Fred somebody who was helping him.
Yeah.
And that's at the time that Greg and I was on Greg's case about not correcting what Greg says was the mistakes of him being confused with Don Campbell.
Yeah.
So I was on Greg's case about that. And I told Greg when he came back from the UK, he had newspaper clippings that talked about how Campbell Lock created these things. Now, I knew Greg might have been talking about the creations of Watch Writers Workshop and the Unison stuff. But they had taken it that Greg was the creator of locking. And I had seen other posters where Greg didn't correct. I said, Greg, we need to write a retraction to these things. So Greg said, "No, Skeet, we don't. I don't have to do that. I didn't miss, not my mistake." I said, Greg, if you don't, you're going to have a big problem with Don, because Don already thinks that you're trying to steal his reputation and name.
Yeah.
So I knew of Fred, and I knew that that Fred, Josh, and Sundance had directed the new camp around him. So I knew that was taking place. So you telling me or telling the world your story, it brings a lot of things together, Ricky, a lot of things together. But that's not the end of your story. There's something else that took place in your story. Go ahead and tell it, Rick.
Yeah. So anyway, so recently, there was a video on Facebook, and Rob One from Sweden, tagged me, and I said okay. And then I asked him later on, I messaged him, hey, what's going on? Why did you tag me? And I said, Ricky, I think you should see this one. And I said okay. And then I message him. I said, is it good or not good? Because if it is good, I would rather not entertain it. Because there's so many things, negative things going on around the world. I don't want to be influenced by them. Especially we are at the moment. I'm in a very delicate part of my life, as my career, because I'm doing so much things at the moment. It's not just about the dance, and of course I have my family, but at the same time I have different businesses that I'm taking care of, and they require so much of my time and my focus. So I said, is it good or not good? And he said, I like Rob One, the loyalty. Talking about loyalty, he's a good friend. And he just told me very, very nicely. And he said that I think that you should see it, because there was something about you not paying or not talking, something about what Tash was saying. And I said, oh no, and then he said, you should watch it. I said, just summarize to me what it is. So and then, he told me, about that, Frank has, some grudges or something, or some, they were not paid. And I said, okay, they didn't know the story. They didn't know that Tash doesn't know the story, because it was between me and Frank. And my responsibility was to bring them over here. I paid for their hotel. I paid. It was never. They were never a part of it. But I actually opened it up to me. To them. I said it honestly from the beginning that, hey, is it okay that we will just pay? Take it like as a vacation. You can come over here, and I'll take care of your expenses, because we don't know, how this would go, and I would take the financial risk. And so it was all clear. So I don't know where this idea got from, that, I didn't pay Frank, I didn't pay this, I didn't pay this. And by the way, I gave something to Scooby too, out of, respect to him. And I told him that, okay, this is a very, very small budget. And I said, but, he was given something. And at the same time, I said, Fred, I'm sorry, we can't give you, because this is, we barely made it, for the cost, because there's so many costs, the food and and we just barely made it.
Story that Ricki
So anyway,
felt the need
that's
to
why I was
clarify and
hurt by
correct
that. I said, okay, why
on
is
the
it suddenly
internet
now?
because
And for some reasons, I think it was
announcement
because of the
on the internet.
conversation that we had there.
So this is why
We had here in Finland when Tash was here, that she probably kept a grudge on me, and she even said it. I am not anymore angry at Ricki. I was never angry at Tash, even though we had some intense conversation here because of philosophy and because of that. I
People
always
don't
want to bring
understand that
people
when
in.
you have a difference in opinion, that it does not have to ruin the relationship. That's what negotiation and talking is about. I find the same thing whenever people think that I am loyal to them and they believe that they can say what they want to about the dance is untrue. And I'm going to sit by and allow the dance to be slandered because of my friendship with them. And when an OG is supposed to correct things that are wrong in the history, when you do that, one of the first things that happen, Ricki, and you know it in business, is to discredit or slander the person, and that's terrible. It's the way that the scene has submitted itself to the commercial aspect and forgot the street rules that tie loyalty together.
And
people,
and the respect too. I even ask her personally there on the Facebook. I say, hey, what's up, Tosh? I never get any answer. And so, I mean, the right thing to do, the respectful and the proper way to do it, hey, is to, because you say something public, so you have to make it public as well. Like, hey, by the way, I brought you in here and we talk about this one. And that was the right thing to do, or at least message me. That's the proper and respectable way to do. As I said, I have no grudge against her or anybody. No. I try to be as positive and as supportive as transparent as possible.
The thing is to tell the story that everybody is so intent on climbing the ladder of control, and a lot of people out there in the dance world, now that there are careers being made, the career takes priority over the soul of the dance, and that's sad. I understand it, but that's the way the world has gone now, where the way this dance was developed in the streets and the hoods of South Central Los Angeles and Watts and Compton, there is a street code, just like there's a street code with the gangs. And Greg says it before, we were like a gang, but we were dancers. But we abided by the street codes. The street codes became eroded when other people from outside of the culture came in and made offers of careers. And many times those offers and promises never materialized. But the street code eroded. And with the street code erodes, the soul of the dance erodes. And I tell students that if you do not respect and profess loyalty to something greater than yourself, it doesn't have a soul.
Yeah, and it will eventually also catch up on you, and it will come back. And I always believe in kindness, and I always believe in loyalty. I try to keep my friends. I mean, we've been friends for a long time, and I try to do that with others. As I said, I'm trying to all the time bridge and make peace. But sometimes, of course, misunderstanding is it happens. And the most important thing is we try to all the time. It's the goodwill. It's the intention to do good things. The intention
I found
to
also,
fix
Ricki,
things. Yeah.
I found also that was part of the downfall of myself. I always tried to bridge the gap between Don and Greg. From way back when I was on tour with the Lockers, I tried to bridge the gap between Don and Greg. But if I didn't pick a side, then you were liable to be slandered by both sides. I want to thank Ricki Carrenza for that interview. And we just did that one a couple of weeks ago, and I thought that there was a lot of clarification that needs to be put into it. You know, it's the stories that are told, and more or less the stories that are untold, the ones that go untold, that lead people into being able to distort history and the lies of history. There are a lot of things in this story that really emulates what took place years ago to have locking be what it is today. And it's a remarkable dance style. It touches people from coast to coast and around the world, across waters and bridges and across languages around the world. But understanding what took place at the most highest level of exposure, the commercial world, has an understanding as to how it affects the world today. There was a word that was mentioned many, many, many times in the interview with Ricki, and that word was business. And if you take a really good look at the business that transpired with all of the names involved, it was who can bring how many people to what event. And that's done by promoters. That's what's done. If you got a big enough name and you draw people, that's fine. But in locking, when people start setting up the smaller events, they endorsed people that had their own following that could bring people to their workshops and their events. So the business of it took place in even developing the name from the Locker Legends boot camp to the elite Las Vegas camp, with every dancer wanting to be a part of that to bring their section in. And that's what causes the problems. One thing I always do is I always give props on all of my shows. And this is a unique show. And we got some more. I got videos. I got interviews. I got an interview with Tony Basil back in the early 2000s. So a lot of the confusion and stuff. I got interviews with Captain Crunch, with the original Captain Crunch. I got interviews with Tito Collins. I have a lot that I'm going to go through on here. But I first want to say, I want to give respect and rest in peace to Don Campbell, because there is no dispute as to him being the creator of the dance style, the improvisational dance style of locking that we all built upon. There must be a foundation to build upon. I want to give thanks to Greg, and I'm going to call him by his original name, Campbell Jr. The name that I saw and that I came along with in the dance world was Greg Campbell Jr. We called him Campbell Jr. I only known him to change the name to Campbell Lock once Don tried to solidify himself with locking and Campbell Lock and Campbell Locking. Then I seen Greg change his name to Greg Campbell Lock Jr. But rest in peace, Greg, because without Greg setting down and understanding that there was a structure, and it was a structure that he actually taught the lockers to do. And some of that will come out in some future video, but he actually taught the lockers to do. Understanding the dynamics from 1974, where I saw Greg Campbell Lock Jr. actually do the choreographing of those skits. And I knew where those skits and that choreography came from, that it wasn't Tony Basil that choreographed. She staged and she set up the lightings and she had the connection. But the choreographing of the locking routines came through Greg, and him and Basil set up the business end of it. Watching Don, the creator, being spotlighted with the headlight name, but not involved in that business end of it, set up an animosity between Greg and Don that transpired through decades, that divided people, that had one deciding on who they were going to support and not support, and it left the dance in a certain situation. I want to give much respect and thanks to Shabadoo, because without Shabadoo having the ability, both physically and as an appearance and in his talent, to take the dance to the big screen, which actually exposed the story of Don Campbell and Tony Basil. Without Shabadoo being able to do that, it would not have been exposed internationally. And that's part of the props that need to take place. I want to give thanks to Mr. Penguin. Mr. Penguin went downstairs from the studio at NBC and auditioned for What's Happening. They didn't have in mind to take a fat guy. It was designed for a jock, a taller, thin, white guy, to be involved in that show. But Mr. Penguin's personality, Fred Berry, Rerun's personality, was so powerful that it got him that position. And if you watch all of the shows of what's happening, he never failed to bring his buddies back on with him. At some point in time, they even could not use the word lockers. They had to use the name Rockets. And very lucky that people didn't start calling it the Rocket Dance, because they did call it the rerun dance because he exposed it nationally here on a national TV show. And he was always loyal to his crew. He always brought them back and exposed them. Many shows they were on his TV show, but he suffered the wrath of Don Campbell being upset and Don Campbell's family being upset because he was known as the rerun that created the rerun dance. And I want to give much props to him. But I don't just give props to the famous people. We explain their stories, but there's so many stories untold. I got footage from these guys too, from many of these guys. I got footage from Guy Evans, Soul Train dancer, locker inside of the clubs. His name was Shock Lock. And he was confused when they became a Shaka Lock from New York, but he was proud to embrace it that he was Shock Lock. Don Campbell gave him that name. Rest in peace, Guy. I have interviews from Guy that will one day make part of these episodes. Eugene Henderson, F&M. People always talk about Eugene Henderson was good enough to be in the lockers. And I can attest to that. He was. He was good enough to be into the lockers. Greg tells a story about the first time we took Shab to the summit. And we, as a joke, made him dance next to F&M. And Shab tells the story, told the story himself in his time, that dancing next to F&M, he began to learn how powerful the dance was. So much props and rest in peace, Eugene Henderson. Props also to Morris Bailey of the Ghetto Dancers. And Eugene was also a member of the Ghetto Dancers. Morris Bailey was one of the very, very early first in the locking scene. His name was Cisco Kid. Summit, Citadel, Mavericks, Soul Train, all of those things Morris Bailey was part of. And the Ghetto Dancers was one of the early original groups on the scene. Morris Bailey, rest in peace. Also a member, a very special member to me, of the original Go-Go Yo-Yo Brothers family that performed with us at the sports arena, was a dancer by the name of Enoch Smith. We called him Elmer Fudd. And he passed away a while back. One of the most energetic lockers you ever wanted to see. He was part of the expanded, not just expanded, but the original Go-Go Yo-Yo Brothers family. And I want to give props to him and rest in peace. There are a lot of memorials around, but they don't really know the history of the original scene, the real originals. And I also want to give respect to the original Charles Robot, the original. I want to give respect to him because somewhere in the street dance of Robot, he was lost, even though Don Campbell says that part of his inspiration was the Robot Shuffle. And we have footage of him on the very early scenes. I want to give props to him. You know, this video tells how loyalty to the game of locking, the purpose, the message of locking, is really more important than loyalty to the business. Now, people say, how can you say that? You know, money is king where we come from. But locking became powerful because all of this rules was anti-accepting the establishment's money at first. It was that we could build without their backing. We could build something so powerful that they would have to have it. And we did. And then it changed. Then money took priority. And when money took priority, the soul of the dance was lost. I'm not saying you can't make money. What I'm saying is that when you put it back in perspective, when you put the horse back in front of the cart, the horse moves. That lockers and street dancers in general have to dance for a purpose for it to be valuable to the people who's willing to pay. Because that's the only way they're going to see that it's real. That's the only way they're going to really want it. That when you dance for a purpose, when you have a message, the power of the dance shows. When you dance for the money, it may be fun, but the power of the dance does not show. Now, let me move on and end this thing Next week, we got a very special guest when we do our review. I just did an interview with the Brazilian phenom, the dancer that put it on the map in Brazil, that put locking and street dance on the map in Brazil, Frank Ajara. We've done an interview, and we're going to go through a lot of things with Brazil, and I love the Brazilian culture. The title of that is going to be about the culture, because the Brazilian culture of the African migration is powerful there, just like the African migration to the United States was powerful here. So stay tuned next week at 10 o'clock. We're going to do the review of my interview with Frank Ajara from Brazil and that wonderful, wonderful culture. Then you also know that on October 9th, we're going to do the review with me and Ricki Carrenza right here in the studio, going through the whole movie of Beyond Hip Hop. So I hope you enjoyed this. And yeah, we're going to have some more dance videos, and we're going to pick up the tune, and everything's not going to be the educational part of it. But when we eliminate the education, we allow the door to open to recreation. So God bless you all. Much love. And I'm just happy to be around to be able to spread it to you. Peace to you from OG, the OG Skeeter Rabbit. And I want you all to enjoy until I see you again next week when I broadcast again from this rabbit hole, sitting right in the middle of the Island of Soul. Peace to you.